Hey guys, welcome to Carnivorous Plants Hub. Today I am going to be bringing you a lot of really good information about these guys here, these Venus Flytraps. I picked these guys up from Lowe's, and today what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be repotting these Venus Flytraps, and then we're also going to be going into pretty in depth here into some care, Venus Flytrap care tips, kind of a 101 for beginners. Not a lot of super advanced stuff here, but if you bought one of these guys kind of on an impulse purchasing decision, which is I think how a lot of these guys get purchased up, that's no worries, because I'm going to teach you everything that you need to know to be able to care for these little guys. They do kind of go against the conventional planting gardening wisdom, so there's definitely some information that you need to know. But I'm going to be going over all of that with you today. By the time we're done, you should have the basic knowledge and understanding of these plants to be able to care for them and allow them to grow really big and strong and then multiply. So you can kind of see everything I have here. I got my planter, I got some distilled water, I got my plants, I got my TDS meter. You don't need one of these, but we're going to talk about this a little bit. I got a little tweezer kit here for pruning, and then of course my core gear mister, which is one of my favorite tools that I have. But let's go ahead and talk about the Venus Flytraps first. So I got these guys from Lowe's. What I've actually learned is that the majority of people that come to my channel that are looking for help have basically impulse purchased one of these guys from Walmart, from Lowe's, from Home Depot, Trader Joe's. There's a lot of different grocery stores and nurseries out there that sell these guys, and the problem is a lot of people impulse purchase these and they don't realize that there's a little bit of a different type of care that you need to give these guys than you would normally give like a typical flower or vegetable, that kind of stuff. It's pretty different than the normal. So we're going to be going over that pretty in depth. This is going to be a little bit of a longer video just because I'm going to be repotting those. And then we're also going to be going over the care, so make sure you guys grab a coffee, maybe a notebook to take some notes. I got my coffee here, so cheers to you guys, and let's go ahead and learn about some Venus Flytraps. One of the coolest things about starting this channel was I was expecting to be able to help a lot of people learn how to care for these plants, but one of the biggest and most unexpected surprises that has been really fantastic is I've learned so much from my community. This community has been super involved, so many comments being left, people are hitting me up on my Instagram. I've learned so many little tips and tricks here and there that have helped me care for these plants even better than what I used to care for them. So my process is evolving for how I care for these. And that's why I wanted to do another video with care tips and then also repotting these, because I do things just a little bit different. My old care tips, my old ways of repotting these still work fantastically. You're going to have a ton of success, but there's just a couple things here and there that I've picked up that are really, I think, great for being able to care for these plants, and that's probably been my favorite thing about this community. So I just want to thank you all out there. I appreciate you so much. Guys, make sure to subscribe to the channel too if you want to see more videos like this or get some updates on not just these plants, but I have some other really great carnivorous plants. Thank you so much for being here, liking the videos, subscribing to the channel. All that stuff is really helpful. I want to start a carnivorous plant nursery someday in my community, and really the whole goal and point of this channel is really to do exactly what I'm doing and to learn exactly what I'm learning. So I'm trying to share that knowledge with you guys now so that you guys can grow these amazing plants. I think the more people that grow these, the better. We're really trying to get away from the care tips on the back here. We're going to start talking about that here in just a second, because there's some really bad information on there. But let's go ahead and get started with opening these guys up and then jumping into care tips. So these are actually, I haven't seen these domes before. We call these death cubes. I got these ones from Lowe's. I think they were like $7-8 each. But let's go ahead and open this up here and take a look at the actual plant. This is a little bit better design than the old death cubes. I do appreciate that, which is kind of nice. So let's go ahead and get this out so you can take a look at it. There you go, which is pretty nice. Got to get it over the ridge of the pot there. Go, pull this out. There we go. This one actually has some really beautiful color. Look at those red traps. Nice size traps too for a Lowe's Venus Flytrap. These are just typicals. Most of the time they're not any type of cultivar when you buy them from Lowe's or Home Depot or Walmart. They're just kind of typical Venus Flytraps, but these are actually some really beautiful ones. They're a little ragged. They're kind of drooping and hanging over, and that's probably because they haven't had a lot of sunlight. So they're probably kind of light starved right now. But we will definitely fix that, and we will talk about lighting here in just a little bit. But real quick, guys, I did want to mention too, real quick, before I start talking about this, is I did divide this up. If you look in the description, you'll be able to see that I kind of divided this up by where I talk about care tips. So if you're not super interested in the repotting side of this, make sure and look down there, because you can, if you want to know specifically about dormancy or lighting or watering, you can jump to that section. I have that all outlined for you in the description. But all right, let's go ahead and talk about what we have here. So it says, location, bright light, high humidity, temperatures ranging from 45 degrees to 85 degrees. Dry drafts are carnivorous plants' worst enemy. I don't know about that. I don't think that they're the worst enemy. The humidity is not super important for these plants, although I think they do a little bit better in higher humidity environments. Not one of the most important things for carnivorous plants. I live in a pretty dry area, and I don't have really any problem growing these, and I don't give them any extra humidity, so I don't really think that that's true. You probably don't want to keep them in 45 degrees summer or degrees in the summertime. During the winter time, that's probably fine, but this is pretty broad to say it's just between 45 and 85. We'll talk about that more when we go into the dormancy side of things. Watering, keep them moist. Never let them be completely dried out. Water generously with bottled or rainwater if possible. Yeah, that's kind of BS. So you should never use bottled water for these guys. Bottled water is not distilled. It does not remove the minerals. And actually, I have a bottle of water in here. When we talk about watering, I'm going to show you exactly why you do not want to use bottled water. I'm going to use my TDS meter here to measure it for you, so you can see that bottled water is not going to work. You'll see exactly what I'm talking about here in just a little bit when we talk about. Rainwater is usually okay, although I do still recommend that you measure your rainwater with a TDS meter, especially if you're collecting it off your roof, because minerals and different chemicals can get into the water from your gutters and roof, but we'll talk about that again. The fun part, you can feed small insects such as flies, ants, and small moths, or use a balanced fertilizer at 1/4 strength. Always water before fertilizing. Never feed with processed meats. Yeah, don't use any real meat. The bug part is fine. The fertilizer thing is really misleading. You have to be really careful when fertilizing these plants. You don't really need to fertilize them. You also have to use a very specific fertilizer and a very specific dilution for that fertilizer. So this is also very misleading, because I think a lot of people would read that and be like, oh, I can just pick up your normal garden variety fertilizer, which is absolutely untrue. That'll kill these almost immediately. So there you go, guys. So this is why so many people kill Venus flytraps, because this is terrible care instructions. I don't understand why the care instructions are so terrible. They're extremely vague. I wish that they had you go to a website or something where they had a more specific care instructions and they gave you better instructions, because these are terrible, and these will kill. If you follow this to a T, this will kill your Venus flytrap, especially if you use bottled water. Bright light. It doesn't say anything about direct sun. You can't really grow these in a windowsill. You can, but it doesn't usually work out that well. So we're going to talk about good care instructions. Ignore the care instructions that you received on the back of your Venus flytrap. Almost all of the companies have terrible care instructions like this, unless you're buying from a nursery or a carnivorous plant reputable seller. Like, those people usually give you good care instructions and better information, but this is complete BS, so do not follow that. So let's get rid of that. All right, guys, so one of the first things that we're going to talk about is, and actually while I talk about this, I am going to start putting my dirt into my planter here. One of the things that we're going to talk about first here is the planter. So one of the most important things with your planter, I'm going to pull this off camera real quick while I'm talking so I can get this filled up. One of the most important things with your planter is that it has holes in the bottom. You want to make sure that it's plastic. You want to stay away from any type of glass. Glass can get too hot in the sun and it'll actually burn your roots. So you want to avoid any glass. You also want to avoid anything ceramic. Ceramic can leach minerals into the soil. If it is ceramic, you want to make sure that it's glazed on the inside, and you want to make sure that it's like an organic glaze, because sometimes the chemicals from the glaze can also harm your Venus flytrap. So there's kind of a lot to remember there. So I typically just kind of avoid any type of clay pots, unless I know the person that makes them and I can be real clear about what's in those. The other thing you want to kind of avoid is like a terracotta. Terracotta also leaches minerals into the soil. And if your pot is leaching minerals into the soil, that can be harmful in the long term for your Venus flytrap, so you want to kind of avoid that. Make sure with your plastic planter, if you live in a warm area, you want to go with a lighter color, like a white or a cream. I got this guy here. I shouldn't have filled that up yet because I probably need to show you a little bit, but I got this guy here just as an example. You got the lighter color, and one of the most important things is that you have the bottom has holes in it, so that you can use the bottom to soak up the water. I don't do a lot of top watering with Venus flytraps, and I'll explain that a little bit later. I really like to tray water, and I'll give you more specific information on that when we go over the watering side of things, but you want to make sure that your pot has sufficient holes in the bottom so that it can soak up the water when you're watering these guys. So that's the planter. Stay away from terracotta, stay away from glass, stay away from anything ceramic unless you know very specifically what the ceramic is made out of and that the inside is glazed with a natural glaze. So why don't we talk about, since we're digging into the soil here, let's go ahead and talk about the soil. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to let you guys know something here real quick. This is kind of an announcement for me. Me and my wife actually are starting the process of creating our own soil. So this soil right here is actually a mixture of a soil that I have created, and I have a little bit of this guy left over. I actually have a review for this organic earth. There's a link in the description for this stuff. It's actually really good stuff, and I like it. There's a few things that I don't like about it though, is that you get some of these little pieces of wood in here, kind of some of these branches, twigs and stuff, and I'm not really a big fan of that. I like to pick a lot of that out, which I spent a little bit of time already picking some of that stuff out. So you can see here, stuff like that, those twigs. I don't really like that being in there because sometimes the wood can actually leach some stuff into your soil as well. So me and my wife are actually in the process of making our own soil. As of right now, we're not quite there yet. We're in the process of making it, deciding where to get all of the materials so that we can make the highest quality soil for you guys. So check a link in the description. It may be ready to go, it may not. I hope that when you're listening to this, by then that we have our soil ready to go and you can buy it from me directly. If not, the organic earth is a good substitute. Essentially what you want, if you're going to make your own soil, is you want a mix of peat moss. You want to make sure it's sphagnum peat moss, and then you want perlite, and then I like to have like a silica sand, which is like a quartz sand in here, because the quartz sand doesn't leach any minerals, because it's a hard mineral, or it's a hard stone, so it doesn't leach any minerals. So we do peat moss, silica sand, and perlite, and that's going to be the base of our mix. There might be some other stuff in there, I haven't decided yet, just things to help keep the soil really aerated. You want the water to run straight through it, but you also want it to hold on to the water. I know that kind of doesn't make sense, but you do not want water sitting and collecting, because you can get crown rot with these plants really easy if the water stays super stagnant. And that's also one of the reasons I don't like to top water, but we'll get into more of that when we're actually talking about the watering side of things. So peat moss, perlite, and silica sand, you can get this stuff at most of the stores. You can find like a pool filter sand, works really good. The peat moss and the perlite are pretty easy to find. You do want to make sure that you soak your peat moss and your perlite so that you can rinse off any potential negative or hazardous materials or minerals that are on there. My mix here, I've had it soak. I've actually sifted it through some water, and I've had it soaking in this bag, so I know that this is good to go. Again, this is a combination of my own personal mix and the organic earth mix. I'm just trying to get rid of the organic earth mix because I bought it for a review just to show you guys what it looks like. And I don't actually buy that very often. I typically make my own, but I just kind of bought it for a video for you guys, so I had a little bit of it left over and I wanted to kind of use it. So check out the link in the description, guys. Hopefully by now I'm making my own soil and I can sell that to you. If not, there's other options in there for you guys to buy some stuff to get that going. So, okay, so that's the planter. That's the soil. The other thing you guys can use is a sphagnum moss mix, or a long fiber sphagnum moss, which is actually what these guys are in here. You can see this is like a long moss mix. I don't know what kind of moss this is. This could be several different types of moss, but you want to use a sphagnum moss. It's a really popular mixture. A lot of people really like to use it. I don't use it personally, but I really don't have anything against it. I think it's also a great mix. I'm just more experienced with the peat moss and sand mix with perlite. And I've used this for so long, I really understand it a little bit better. I know how to use it a little bit better. And I think it's a little bit better for people that are beginner growers, just because it's a little bit easier to manage. And it's also much easier in the repotting process. You'll be able to see when I pull this out of here that repotting these guys can be kind of a nightmare because getting the roots free of the sphagnum moss can be kind of a nightmare. Whereas peat moss, you dip it in water and boom, it pops right off, it's no problem. With this, you have to be a little more careful because you can damage the roots. So we'll talk about that more once I get to that point here. All right, so we've talked about the planter, we've talked about the soil, so we're good to go there. So I'm gonna go ahead and move this back. And real quick before I start taking these guys out of the pots, I want to talk about the water, because this is really important, especially since the instructions on the box that it came in were so completely untrue. So what we're going to do, I'm going to show you guys this TDS meter here. This is a cheap like $15 TDS meter. You can get these on Amazon for like 10-15 bucks. They're really nice because you can test your water, especially if you're using rainwater, just to make sure that your water is hitting a 0 or under 50 parts per million. You want to make sure you're under 50. So let's go ahead and turn this guy on. I have some distilled water over here. Guys, you want a mineral-free water. You want your water to be distilled rainwater. You can use reverse osmosis water. You cannot use filtered water. You cannot use bottled water. You cannot use purified bottled water. You can't use anything through a Brita system. None of that. It doesn't actually remove any of the minerals. There is a smart zero water pitcher that comes with a TDS meter that you can use that does actually get rid of all the minerals and dissolve solids from the water. So I do have a link for that in the description too if you want to go that route. It doesn't make a ton of water at a time, but for like these, if you just had these two Venus flytraps, it would be perfect. So let's go ahead and so this is going to tell us, you also want to make sure that your water's around room temperature between 70 and 80 degrees. Otherwise you can get false readings with this. There's a little bit of science behind that, but you just want to make sure it's not super hot, not super cold. Otherwise this will give you some false readings. But let's go ahead and test this here. This is basically distilled water. So you can see that's not changing. This is distilled water from Walmart. It's like 80 cents, super affordable for a gallon. You can see there it's not changing at all. It's staying right at 0 parts per million. That means that there is no dissolved solids in this water. It is truly a distilled water, okay? Okay guys, so I'm going to show you here what the TDS readout is of a basically a bottle of drinking water here that you get from Walmart. So I got this bottle of drinking water here. So I'm going to open this up and I'm going to put it in my cool little shot glass here that my daughter got me from Washington DC, a little rocket ship shot glass. So I'm going to go ahead and put the water in there, and then we're going to measure it with this TDS meter so you can see that the bottled water typically does go over 50. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't, but so here's just a Walmart drinking water, great value. I'm going to bring this up here real quick just so I don't spill it all over the place. Again, Walmart purified drinking water. Probably fine to drink, but I'm guessing it's not great for. So there we go. So this is real close. It probably wouldn't kill your plant right away. It's 55. You need to keep it under 50, but I wouldn't be comfortable giving this to my carnivorous plant at 55. So it would be a slow death. Over a span of time, it would probably not be the greatest for your plant. But 55 is definitely a little high, so I really strongly disagree with using bottled water. But yeah, so that's just kind of show you guys how to use these TDS meters. Do the exact same thing with rainwater. Once you collect your rainwater, just throw it in, make sure you're under 50. I would say anything 40 and below is fine. I'm a little more cautious with my water. I don't like it to be anything over 40, but they say the standard is to kind of keep it over or under 50. So that's how a TDS meter works, guys. Again, make sure that the water's fairly room temperature. You can get these on Amazon for like 10-15 bucks. I think this one was on sale for like 12 bucks when I got it. So pretty simple, easy to use. It has the kind of the diagram on the back telling you what's good for drinking, just so you have a better understanding. But so that's pretty much the water, guys. Distilled water, rainwater. Make sure you're testing your rainwater. Reverse osmosis water. If you want to dig more into reverse osmosis, by all means, go ahead and do so. Okay, so now guys, what I'm doing is I am going to take these guys out of the planter, and I'm going to use this distilled water here to kind of help me get some of this sphagnum moss off of this plant, because this is going to be kind of tricky. They get pretty compact in here. Hold it over this guy. Push it up just a little bit. There we go. You can see That's what it looks like. So we're going to pull this off, and we're going to do our best not to rip any of these roots. Okay, so we're getting into the repotting part here. I will talk here in just a little bit. I think the next thing that we are going to jump into is probably talk about dormancy. Dormancy is really important. Let's go ahead and get this guy off here. So now that I'm getting down a little bit here, we're going to start seeing the black roots from the Venus flytrap here pretty soon. See this guy right here? That looks like a, see these black ones? Those are usually the flytrap roots. What I'm going to do is, since I'm getting down here, I'm going to go ahead and dip this in the water so that we can hopefully get this off just a little bit easier, because we really want to avoid breaking off all of these roots. Venus flytraps don't really like their roots to be messed with that much, so this can be kind of a stressful process for the plant. So let's go ahead and dip this in here now. Actually, let me get this one off real quick, and then we'll dip him in here. You can get the flytraps wet. The water does not really hurt them as long as it's distilled. Put it in there. Just get as much of this off as possible. Now guys, it is important to note here, I used to think it was really important to get every little piece of this off, but I actually don't do that anymore. I think it's more important to keep your root system intact than it is to get as much of this moss off as possible. So if it means destroying your roots, then I say leave a little bit of it on, and it'll actually cause a little bit less distress to your plant than if you were to just remove every single piece of moss off here. So this off, and then over the years this moss will actually eventually just deteriorate, and it'll just be the peat moss left over when you repot it. So right, so I'm actually just going to go ahead, let's get a little bit more here. Go, that was a nice chunk. So there you go guys, see those black roots? Those are Venus flytrap roots, and it is normal for them to be black. So here's the rhizome starting to poke out a little bit here. You see that white part right there? That's the rhizome of the plant. Let me get a little bit closer. The rhizome is basically the part that stores all the energy for your Venus flytrap, and then the roots come straight out of the rhizome. So I'm going to consider myself pretty lucky right now, and I'm going to not mess with this anymore. I'm going to let that stay just like that. So I'm going to set this over here. Let's get this one off. This. Okay, then I'm going to jump into the next one here. Let's do it. So guys, while I'm doing this one, since I kind of talked you through that one, I don't think I need to talk you through this again. Let's talk about dormancy. So these plants do require a dormancy period, and one of the trickiest parts of dormancy is that you really do need to get the temperatures down under usually around 40, under 40 degrees, somewhere in that area, in order for them to actually jump into a dormant period. And then you really actually have to keep your temperatures down that low. Otherwise it could trick them into coming out of dormancy early, which can be kind of detrimental for the plant. So you may live in an area that has winters that are pretty mild, and it stays around that 30, 40 degrees all year, and that's fantastic. You're probably good to go. Just put it in your garage or put it outside and overwinter it, put some pine needles on it or some bark, and you'll probably be just fine. If you live in an area that gets colder like I do, I get into the zeros, it gets down below zero at times, that's going to be a little bit harder for you to maintain your plant. So you want to make sure that you're overwintering these if it gets super cold. You want to make sure that they're coming probably out of the weather, like into a garage or something similar. I know that some people even have a box they'll put them in with a light bulb in there. So the light bulb produces not a heat lamp, but just a light bulb, so it produces just enough heat to keep it warm. I've seen people keep them in boxes where they just stuff the boxes with blankets. They don't need light when it's that cold, so you don't really need to keep them in an area where they're getting a lot of light. Light is something we're going to talk about here in a little bit. So really important from about probably October, November through February, March. And then once it starts to warm up, you put them outside and they kind of naturally will come out of that dormant period. But they do need the dormancy. It is required. You can't skip the dormancy, at least not if you're a beginner grower. There are some people out there that say that they can skip dormancy and keep these plants alive. But if you're a beginner grower and you're not that experienced, it's not a good idea to try that. You're probably not going to have much success. So you definitely want to put these through a dormant period. Maybe do a little bit more research on dormancy if you feel like you need more information around your area specifically. Maybe find somebody in your area that grows, you know, on a Facebook group or something like that, and ask them exactly what they do for dormancy. Especially if you live in a hotter area. Warmer areas are tricky because you have to figure out a way to get the temperatures down on these plants. And if it's 70, 80 degrees year round, that's not low enough to go into dormancy. You may have to use like a refrigerator or something along those lines. So find somebody in your area that has these plants, and then talk to them about what they do for dormancy. That's my best tip for you, because they already know what to do because they've been doing it. So this plant here does not have a great root system. I'm a little concerned. You can see the roots are really shallow here, and I don't know if that was just me that pulled a couple of them off or what, but definitely not a great root system. This one is not in super great shape. So I'm gonna pull this off here, and we'll get this guy going here pretty quick. I didn't even really have to dip that one in the sphagnum moss. The moss actually came, or into the distilled water, the moss came off that one a little bit easier. These guys, before you repot this, make sure you soak your peat moss mix. Move this water out of the way. If you don't soak your peat moss mix, it makes it really hard to work with and makes it really difficult, especially when you're trying to make the hole here to put your plant down in. So just make sure make sure you soak this like in a plastic bag with some distilled water. Make sure it gets nice and wet. It'll become more pliable, easier to use, and just easier to manage. Make sure you're using only the distilled water though, like we've already kind of talked about. All right, so one of the important things when you repot these is that you want to make sure that you make a deep enough hole to where you can get the roots to go down as far as possible. The roots like to grow straight down. They don't like to be bunched up. So the best that you can when you make a hole here, you want to make sure to go down as far as you can. And then if you can use like a pen. I'm just gonna grab this pen here, and then what I do is I kind of take the plant here, I get the roots down in there like that, and then you just kind of push them down to the bottom so that they can kind of get extended down there. Go. It's okay that there's a little bit of moss left here. That's not going to hurt anything. I'm going to pull that piece off. Okay, pull those up a little bit. Push that down. You do want your rhizome to stick out just a little bit. It doesn't have to go all the way down. I like the rhizome to be poking out just a hair here. That'll help give it some air so that it's less susceptible to crown rot, because crown rot, guys, is a real thing, especially if you live in an area that has slightly colder temperatures. Water sits longer, and you do not want to get your plant susceptible to crown rot. So we are going to talk here in just a little bit about watering these plants. I know we already talked about the kind of water, but once I get these into here, we're going to talk about how to water these, because that's one of probably the biggest things that people actually mess up, is watering these plants. So make sure when you get it in here, guys, you want that crown to be sticking out just a little bit. And then you also don't want to pack down your soil. One of the biggest things you want is for your water to go through this. So your soil does not need to be super compact and tight. You want it to be kind of light and fluffy. So make sure that you're not really compacting your soil into there. You want it to be nice and airy for these guys. Okay, so we're going to, yeah, this one's not in super good shape, guys. So let's go ahead and let's get them in though. Get the hole there. This one's going to be a little bit easier to get the roots in, just because there isn't much of a root system here, which is one of the reasons I am concerned. Poke it down in there. I'm going to turn it just a little bit so that these fly traps aren't butting into each other. I'm going to have a little bit of a budding incident there. There we go. Just pack it down a little bit, but hardly any, because we don't want it to be super compact. But you do want your roots to be touching the substrate, right? You don't want your hole just to stay there. And once we water these, that'll help with that too, because I do top water these once I plant them. But so now, real quick, guys, now that we got them into the pot, it's not the most beautiful sight. These are kind of some beat up fly traps, but we do have some new growth here, which is promising. So I'm hoping that these will kind of snap out of it and recover. You know, for this video, I could have got some really beautiful cultivars and done this really amazing fly trap, and you know, showed you how beautiful it is. But I think this is the kind of fly traps that most of you guys out there have. You know, from Walmart or Lowe's or Home Depot. This is kind of what they look like, and they will look better. I promise. If you follow these care tips, these plants will turn into beautiful fly traps. They will get bigger, they'll get strong, they'll stick up. Venus flytraps are very susceptible to repotting shock. And right now that you can see that they're just kind of in a shock phase where all of these flytraps are going to be kind of drooped over, and a lot of people think that that means that their plant is dying. That is not the case. This plant right now is going to have droopy traps. A lot of these flytraps may not make it. A lot of these might turn black and die just because Venus flytraps don't really like to be repotted, especially when they haven't had the best care in the past. So don't worry guys when your existing traps start to kind of droop over like this one here. There's no way to avoid that. You just can't avoid it. It's not your fault. It's just part of the process. What you want is you want these new ones coming up, this new growth, to be nice and strong and you want to see this new growth. That's a good sign that this plant still has a lot of life in it, is when this new growth is popping up. These existing traps, a lot of times guys, they don't make it. So don't be too alarmed if some of these start to turn black and die off. That's perfectly normal. Let's talk about watering, because we talked about the kind of water, but we didn't talk about actually watering these plants, and that's one of the biggest things. It's one of the hardest things to get a grip on is knowing how to water these. Now, what I like to do is I like to wait until the whole surface of my trap of the dirt is dry to the touch. Underneath, it needs to be a little moist. You don't want it to get dry all the way through, but I do like to wait until the top is dry. And then what I do is I fill up my tray full of water. If this tray has water in it for more than 2 days, I then remove my Venus flytrap and I wait for the top to dry out again. If the water is in here for more than 2 days, it means the top will be wet. It'll look nice and wet, but you don't want these plants sitting in water all the time, because they will, the crown of this plant will rot and they will die, especially as temperatures get cooler. They become super susceptible to that crown rot, and sitting them in water all the time can be harmful for the plant. So what you want to do is let it dry out. If you put the plant in water and it's been in water for more than 2 days, take it out of the water, put the water with another plant, and then let it wait for it to dry out again. Do not let it sit in a water for more than a couple days. Exceptions to this may be if you live in a really hot area. If it's super hot and you're filling this thing up constantly, you may want to just keep a constant tray of water under there, because it's just going through the water so fast. That's totally possible in an area where it's super hot. The other exception might be if you're traveling or you're going to be away for the weekend. You may want to fill up your water a little bit higher than normal. It's better for it to have a little over water than it is for it to get super dry and not have any water. So if you're traveling, fill it up, leave it in there for a couple days. That's totally fine. Or if you live in an area that's like super over the top hot, make sure you're taking it out of the water. When temperatures start to cool down, guys, I'm talking like 60s, 50s, you have to be really careful with the water, because the water is going to sit in here a lot longer. You're going to be probably alarmed because you're not going to be watering it as much as you really think that you should be. But your substrate's going to stay wetter longer. If your substrate is wet on top, that means it's also wet on the bottom. Do not give it more water if it's wet on the top, because in the cold, and my crown rot really hit when the 40s and 50s started, and I was becoming alarmed because I didn't think I was giving enough water. It turned out that I was giving them too much water. I was giving them a little bit of a top watering, and then I was giving them a little bit of a water in the tray, and it was just too much, and I did lose some fly traps. So be very careful of that, especially in cooler temperatures. Let the top get dry, let it dry out a little bit before you give it more water. Also, I don't top water very often, but I do like to top water now once a month, because I think that the top watering does flush the plant out. So once a month, give it a good top watering. I like to use like a mister like this, and I'll kind of show you right now, because this is a good time to kind of flush the plant right at the beginning. You just kind of give it, oh, let me put this here. Just kind of give it a good misting like this. And what this does is, if this plant has built up any additional minerals or anything, like maybe from falling debris, or something has leached into the soil, this will actually flush the plant and the water. So this is good to do once a month. This is not how I water typically, and I don't recommend that you water like this all the time. I recommend the tray watering, but this is really good for your plant to do once a month, just to keep, and I even like to kind of come around the sides here, right? Get the whole thing. It's okay to get some water in the traps. That doesn't really hurt them. One of them might shut. It's really not that big of a deal. But make sure and give your plant a really good watering. Trying to think of what else. Oh, sun. Guys, probably one of the most important things with these plants is the lighting, and it's one of the most misunderstood things that people kind of get wrong with this plant. You can see how the flushing, the water came through. I don't know if you can see that, but I'm gonna zoom into this guy a little bit so you guys have something kind of cool to look at while I'm talking about lighting. But okay, so do not try to grow one of these in a windowsill. Some people have had some limited success, but their plants usually look kind of sickly, and they don't live long-term growing it through a windowsill. The windows do filter out the important UV that the plants need to survive. These plants need a lot of sun. I'm talking 8 to 12 hours of direct sun a day. They like to grow outside. They do not like to grow indoors unless you're using a grow light. For a grow light, if you absolutely must grow them inside and you want to use a grow light, check out the Yescoms 225s or like a Sansi 36 watt bulb. I got both of those in the description for you guys, so you can check those out. That's definitely an option for you, but the best thing you can do for these plants is full sun, 8 to 12 hours a day, as much sun as you can possibly give them, with the exception of when it's like 95 or hotter, right? If it's 95 or hotter, you want to give them a limited amount of sun. You can't give them nearly as much, so you probably want to go with like morning sun and then put a shade cloth over them or get them out of the sun into the shade. So the sun and the lighting is the most important part of this. You can do it indoors with the lighting, but then you do have to make sure that you're giving them that period of dormancy, where if it's cold enough during dormancy, you don't have to give them any light during dormancy, because they really do completely die back and then they'll regrow in the spring. Full sun, guys, full sun, full sun, full sun. Do not grow these in a windowsill. You can give it a shot. I have talked to a couple people that have had some limited success with windowsill growing, but I can almost promise you that your plant will die if you attempt to grow these in a windowsill. They need full sun, or they need the full lighting that gives them sort of the equivalent of what full sun would give them. So that's probably one of the most important things, the watering and then the full sun, both very, very, very important. And then the last thing that we're going to talk about, guys, is probably the thing that it's probably the biggest reason that people get these plants. It's the feeding, right? The most exciting thing about a Venus flytrap is putting a bug in there and then watching the trap shut, capture the bug, and then watching the plant kind of eat that bug. It's really cool, it's really exciting, but what I can tell you is that if you put these out in full sun, you're not going to need to really do that. This plant will catch flies, it will catch insects. Guys, check out a video I just did earlier. It talks about, it's one of the Venus flytraps that I've had growing outside. It's a UK sawtooth, and you'll see that every trap in it had a fly. And that's because these guys are really good at what they do. They catch bugs and mostly flies. They will catch fly traps. And then basically what that is for the plant is that's fertilizer. These guys need sun to live. Sun will give them everything they need to be successful in life. They will live with just sun. And then when they eat bugs, it's essentially giving them a fertilizer. So when they eat the insects, their traps will get bigger, they'll get stronger, they'll start flowering, and they'll look like a much stronger plant if they're catching flies. And that's another reason why you want them to be grown outdoors, is because they're gonna have a much better opportunity to catch flies outdoors than they will on a windowsill. Some windowsills they'll still catch bugs because we have flies inside sometimes, but I can promise you that these will live better outside. So show your friends, show your kids, absolutely. Feed them a fly here and there. You can feed them all kinds of different bugs. I stay away from bugs that are much bigger than a trap. You want them to be about the third of the size of the trap. And then I stay away from anything that's got a really, really hard shell. And then anything that's like super, super wet. So I don't do any like pine beetles. I don't do any worms. I've seen a worm rot out a Venus flytrap before, turn black and kill it. So anything that's too wet, like flies are actually the perfect, or like mealworms, bloodworms, those kind of things work really good to feed your Venus flytrap. So I think that's about it. I did want to talk about flowering real quick because I get so many questions about flowering. And guys, I actually do have a video, if you want to go check it out, all about whether to cut the flower or not to cut the flower. And that's one of the biggest questions people kind of get misunderstood about Venus flytraps. If you cut your flower, your Venus flytrap will grow stronger, your traps will get bigger and better. So as soon as you see the little flower start popping up, snip it off, especially like this one right now is probably not strong enough to support a good flowering. I need to be snipping off that flower. If your plant is in really good condition and you want to see your flower, or you want to collect seeds, by all means let that guy flower. Your trap might suffer, or your Venus flytrap, the actual traps might suffer a little bit. They might get a little bit stronger, be a little bit stunted. But a healthy plant can absolutely flower and be just fine. But if you want the biggest, brightest, most beautiful traps, snip off that flower and watch your Venus flytrap grow big and strong. I think that's just about everything, guys. My throat's a little sore. I'm gonna grab my coffee here, take a couple more sips. Again, thank you so much for being here. Guys, for more cool videos like this, if you like this video, if it was helpful for you, make sure to give me a like. Also, subscribe to my channel. My carnivorous plant community is just amazing. It's growing. I'm learning so much from you guys by dropping comments. Like I said, hitting me up on Instagram. You can go check out my Instagram. You can go check out my website. And also, guys, if you want to support me by buying my soil that I'm going to be selling here pretty soon, I would greatly appreciate that as well. So I hope this video was helpful for you guys. And I hope that you guys can buy some of these Venus flytraps from Lowe's, Walmart, all these places, and then be able to repot them and then grow them big and strong, because they're just such a cool plant, and I really want this community to grow, and I want people to learn more about these plants so that they understand them a little better and understand that they go against the normal planting wisdom. So thank you again, guys, so much for being here. I appreciate you so much, and I really hope to catch you guys on my next video. Bye-bye.